I woke up on my 75th birthday and realized something terrifying. Nobody had prepared me for what was coming next. Not my doctor, not my friends, and certainly not those cheery retirement brochures. The harsh truths about aging aren't discussed at dinner parties or celebration lunches. They're whispered in hospital corridors and empty bedrooms. If you're approaching your 70s, have already crossed that threshold, or are caring for someone who has, this video might be the most important one you'll watch this year. I'm going to share 5 harsh truths about life after 75 that nobody warns you about, truths I've witnessed firsthand and wish someone had told me sooner. Our society has a complicated relationship with aging. We celebrate longevity, but turn away from the realities it brings. We're bombarded with images of 80-year-olds running marathons and starting businesses, creating the illusion that if we just try hard enough, aging won't affect us. But these exceptional stories often mask the common experiences that most of us will face. When I turned 75, I had already outlived both my parents. I had no roadmap for what was coming. No one had sat me down and said, "Listen, here's what you need to prepare for." Instead, I encountered these truths one by one, each one catching me off guard. The experience of aging past 75 is fundamentally different from your 60s or early 70s. The changes come faster, the losses pile up quicker, and the world starts to move on without you in ways that can be profound and disorienting. Today, I'm breaking the silence, not to frighten you, but to arm you with knowledge so you can prepare mentally, emotionally, and practically for what's ahead. Because understanding these truths doesn't make them less challenging, but it does give you a chance to adapt, to make informed decisions, and to find moments of joy even as you navigate these difficulties. This isn't about scaring you, it's about empowering you with the information I wish I'd had. By the end of this video, you'll understand why preparing for life after 75 requires more than just financial planning. You'll learn how to have crucial conversations with loved ones before crisis strikes. And most importantly, you'll discover strategies for maintaining dignity and finding purpose, even as your circumstances change. Make sure you stay until the end, because the 5th truth contains the most important insight of all, one that completely changed my perspective on this stage of life. Whether you're watching for yourself or for someone you love, this information could help you avoid the pain of being blindsided by realities that no one wanted to discuss. Let's get into the 5 harsh truths about life after 75 that no one warns you about. The first harsh truth nobody warns you about. After 75, your social circle will collapse faster than you can rebuild it. I remember the day I opened my address book and realized I needed to cross out another name. My friend Margaret had passed away unexpectedly. As I flipped through the pages, I was struck by how many names had been crossed out over the past few years. Friends, neighbors, former colleagues, gone. My weekly lunch group that once required reservations for 8 now barely filled a table for 3. The statistics are sobering. By age 80, most people have lost 50% of their social connections compared to their 60s. And it's not just death that takes people away. Friends move to be closer to their children. Others become unable to drive or leave their homes. Even those still around often have limited energy for socializing, or maybe caring for spouses. This rapid shrinking of your social world comes precisely at the time when you need connection most. Studies show that isolation increases the risk of dementia by 50% and can be as damaging to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yet, rebuilding your circle becomes increasingly difficult. Making new friends takes energy. It requires putting yourself in new environments, something that becomes more challenging with mobility issues or when you no longer drive. The emotional impact is profound. Each loss is not just the loss of a person, but the loss of shared history. When friends who knew you in your youth disappear, they take with them the memories of who you once were. Your identity becomes more fragile with each passing. Ask yourself, have you thought about how you'll maintain meaningful connections when your lifelong friends are no longer there? Who will remember your stories when those who shared your past are gone? The second harsh truth, your independence will likely end before your life does. I always prided myself on my self-reliance. I lived alone for 15 years after my spouse died, managed my own finances, drove wherever I needed to go, and maintained my home by myself. I'll never be a burden, I would declare confidently to my children. Then came the fall that fractured my hip. 3 months later, I received a diagnosis of macular degeneration. Just like that, my driving days were over. The statistics tell a story most of us don't want to hear. By age 85, more than 40% of people need assistance with daily activities. The average person will spend the last 4 to 5 years of their life dependent on others for basic needs. Yet our culture's emphasis on independence makes this transition extraordinarily painful. We're taught that needing help is a failure, not an inevitable part of the human experience. The practical impacts are immediate and far-reaching. When you can no longer drive, your world shrinks dramatically. Shopping, medical appointments, social visits all require coordination with others. Simple tasks you've done for decades, changing light bulbs, opening medication bottles, managing steps, suddenly become dangerous or impossible. Your home, once your sanctuary, becomes filled with hazards. The psychological impact can be even more devastating. Many people experience profound depression when transitioning from independence to dependence. Your sense of control diminishes, decision-making opportunities narrow, and worst of all, you begin to feel like a burden, even when your loved ones insist otherwise. Ask yourself, have you prepared not just financially but emotionally for the likelihood that you will need help with daily tasks? Have you discussed with your family how you want to be cared for when you can no longer care for yourself? The third harsh truth: the healthcare system is not designed to protect your dignity. When I was hospitalized with pneumonia last year, I experienced something I wasn't prepared for. Despite having been a respected professional my entire life, suddenly I was the 81-year-old in room 304. Medical staff discussed my case outside my door as if I couldn't hear or understand. One young doctor spoke only to my son during rounds, despite my repeated questions. When I couldn't get to the bathroom quickly enough, the impatience of an overworked nurse, Madame, feel ashamed of my own body. This isn't rare. Our healthcare system, despite good intentions, routinely infantilizes older adults. Studies show that healthcare providers spend less time with elderly patients, are less likely to fully explain treatment options, and often attribute legitimate concerns to just getting old, rather than investigating properly. The rushed nature of modern healthcare means complex age-related issues get oversimplified, and quality of life concerns take a backseat to mere survival. The consequences go beyond hurt feelings. When your concerns aren't taken seriously, diagnoses get missed. When your preferences aren't respected, you receive treatments you don't want. When your cognitive abilities are underestimated, you lose agency in your own care. And perhaps most painfully, the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, ageism you encounter erodes your sense of value in a society that already makes you feel increasingly invisible. Maintaining dignity requires becoming your own fiercest advocate at precisely the time when your energy for fighting is at its lowest. It means preparing detailed advance directives, bringing companions to appointments, and sometimes making formal complaints when your humanity isn't respected. Ask yourself, do you have someone who can advocate for you in medical settings? Have you documented not just your end-of-life wishes, but how you want to be treated during routine care? The fourth harsh truth: your mind will change in ways you can't fully prepare for. I've always been sharp, quick with words, good with numbers, never forgetting an appointment. My mind was my greatest asset. So when I found myself standing in my kitchen last year, staring at the open refrigerator, completely unable to remember what I'd come for, the fear that washed over me was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Was this normal aging? Or something worse? In that moment, I couldn't tell the difference. Even without dementia or Alzheimer's, your cognitive function will change. Processing speed slows. Multitasking becomes more difficult. Word retrieval falters. Short-term memory becomes less reliable. Studies show that after 75, nearly everyone experiences some degree of cognitive change that impacts daily functioning. What makes this particularly difficult is the uncertainty. Every forgotten name or misplaced item triggers the terrifying question, is this the beginning of serious decline? You become hyper-aware of your mental slips, each one triggering anxiety that only makes cognitive functioning worse. And unlike physical changes, which are visible and generally accepted, cognitive changes often happen in private moments of confusion and self-doubt. The impact on your sense of self can be devastating. When your mind has defined you, through your profession, your wit, your problem-solving abilities, these changes strike at the core of your identity. You may find yourself withdrawing from conversations for fear of not being able to follow complex discussions. You might abandon activities you once enjoyed because they now feel too mentally taxing. The most painful part is often watching the subtle shift in how others respond to you. The slight impatience when you take longer to make a point. The gentle corrections when you've misremembered details. The conversations increasingly directed toward others as if your contribution is no longer expected or valued. Ask yourself, have you created systems to support your changing mind? Have you shared with loved ones how you want to be treated when your thinking isn't as quick or reliable as it once was? The final harsh truth. Finding meaning after 75 requires reimagining. Purpose entirely. 6 months after I retired, I ran into a former colleague who asked what I was doing these days. I launched into an enthusiastic description of my volunteer work and travel plans. He nodded politely, but I could see in his eyes that familiar look, the one that says, "You're not really doing anything important anymore." I went home and cried because part of me believed he was right. Our society defines purpose primarily through productivity, career accomplishments, and family responsibilities. But after 75, careers are typically over. Child raising is long complete. Even volunteer organizations may begin to view you as less capable. Finding meaning requires rejecting these limited definitions of purpose and value. The existential challenge is enormous. When you can no longer do what defined your worth for decades, who are you? When your physical and sometimes cognitive abilities diminish, how do you continue to contribute? When society sees you primarily as a burden rather than an asset, how do you maintain a sense of value? This search for new meaning happens against a backdrop of increasing loss and physical limitation. It requires tremendous courage to build purpose around what you can still do rather than mourning what you've lost. It demands creativity to find new ways to matter in a world that increasingly overlooks you. Here's what I've learned, and this is the insight I promised would change your perspective. The purpose of this stage of life isn't productivity or achievement, it's presence. It's bearing witness to the ongoing story of your family and community. It's holding memories that would otherwise be lost. It's demonstrating how to face loss with grace. Your value isn't in what you produce, but in who you are and what you've seen. The most profound meaning I've found is in sharing wisdom without expectation, loving without condition, and being fully present for others without the distractions that consumed my younger years. This purpose can't be taken away by physical decline or cognitive changes. It remains available even on your hardest days. Ask yourself, can you let go of achievement-based identity and embrace a presence-based purpose? Can you find value in being rather than doing? These 5 harsh truths, the collapse of your social circle, the end of independence, the indignities of healthcare, the changes in your mind, and the necessity of reimagining purpose, aren't discussed nearly enough. We're left to discover them alone, often when we're least equipped to handle them. But facing these truths doesn't mean surrendering to despair. Understanding what's ahead allows you to prepare practically and emotionally. You can proactively build new social connections knowing your original circle will shrink. You can modify your home and adjust your expectations about independence before crisis forces change. You can prepare documentation and find advocates to protect your dignity in healthcare settings. You can create systems to support your changing mind. And most importantly, you can begin now to find meaning beyond productivity and achievement. What I've learned through facing these truths is that this stage of life, while challenging, offers unique opportunities for authenticity and meaning. When the masks of productivity and performance fall away, what remains is the essence of who you are. There's a freedom in that, if you're brave enough to embrace it. If you found value in these insights, please click the like button and share this video with someone who might benefit from hearing these truths. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below, whether you're over 75 yourself or caring for someone who is. For more content about navigating the realities of aging with dignity and purpose, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We release new videos every Wednesday that tackle the topics most people avoid discussing. Thank you for your attention today. By being willing to face these difficult truths, you're already ahead of most people. Remember, understanding what's coming doesn't make it easier, but it does make you better prepared. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.